So we have thoughts that end up determining how we feel about something. There's no doubt that that is true. Where I kind of get off the train a little bit is sometimes how we're feeling about something can generate thoughts too. And so we're complicated people, right? But it is true that thinking does have a great deal to play in our moods and our fears and anxiety states, and even in our relationships and driving behavior. How we tend to have these negative thoughts about ourselves and others and the future, and with that is kind of the outside world. A lot of times, if you even look back to COVID, when it began to get really bad last year, people began to just go into this malaise a lot and begin to feel really, you know like, what am I doing in my life? And I'm not going anywhere, and kind of feel bad about themselves. And then they kind of felt like other people didn't like him and were unsafe, and the world was unsafe. And there was a lot to validate that actually last year, as we saw and experienced, but that life wasn't safe and the future's not going to be any better. And it all goes negative. And once we get in that spiral of negative thinking, then obviously our moods change. So that's kind of where a lot of this came from. And also, if you're interested in the history of this kind of stuff, there's a guy named Albert Ellis who, and I think he might have been before Beck, but he did something called rational emotive therapy, RET, which basically said that we have an event, okay, and then we have a feeling about that event. Somebody rejects you, or you miss the sale, or you don't get the date, or you hit it out of bounds on the golf course, and then you have certain feelings about that. He said, well, there's no law that says you have to feel anything about anything. How you're going to feel about that event depends on what you think about it and how you interpret it. And if you look at it in a catastrophizing, awfulizing, this is terrible, it's horrible that I didn't get that date, that means I'm a horrible person and I'm rejectable and non-desirable and nothing will ever work out, well, then you're going to feel pretty crummy. But if you have other thoughts, like, okay, it was just one person, who knows why they didn't like me? They maybe they had a parent that had my same hair color, and they had a lot of conflicts with that parent, so they don't like my hair color. So they, by the way, this stuff is true. This stuff happens, associations in people's heads. But there are other ways that you can interpret bad events other than something very, very depressing. Okay. All right. So why do I start with all of that? Well, because that's where this cognitive stuff, that's where this next term came from that I want you to begin to think about today, because it is very important. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen it in countless people that I've worked with, because it's just part of the way humans are wired. And here's the term: automatic thoughts. Automatic thoughts. Wow. Now think about this. That's a problematic phrase, right? Automatic thoughts, because we tend to think if I'm thinking something, I'm thinking, meaning there's an action verb in there. I am thinking this. I think this. There's an agent in there. Automatic means there's nobody thinking. It just happens. Okay, folks, that is a problem. That's the problem. It just happens. We're just wired that way. Oh my gosh, how much more out of control of our lives can we be than to not be in control of what we think? You just think that. Well, why do you think that? Just think it. It's the way it is. And think about that, yourself and other people and the world around you, the future. What if you have wiring that automatically, boom, throws those thoughts in there, automatically throws those thoughts in there. And then that determines how we feel and how we behave. And it happens every single day. Every single day. You've seen this in people you're close to. You've seen it absolutely happen. You say no to something or whatever, and they automatically, immediately say, well, I guess you don't care about me. I guess I'm just not cool enough for you, or. And there's an automatic, a lot of times, automatic victimization. Well, you're just an abusive person. Why? Because anybody that says no to them is abusive, right? Or. And there's this automatic thinking. Now, generally, it's problematic. Well, that's not even true. I was going to say, generally, it's most problematic when we think about ourselves because something will happen. You'll immediately think, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that. And there's this automatic thing that starts to happen that's based on wiring, which comes from whoever knows why somebody told you that. There's automatic thinking, though, about the world. You know, one of the things that I've dealt with so many people and seen them do incredible things is to get over the automatic thinking that they have in the performance world of life, thinking they'll never be able to be successful because they didn't come from a successful background, or they'll never be able to be financially successful because they didn't start with anything. And to make money you have to have money and all that. And or to you know I'll never be able to build anything because I don't know anything about that. Well, so what? You can learn. But these belief systems, and that's really what lies underneath an automatic thought. Have you ever thought about doing something outlandish, making a request of somebody, an outlandish request? Like, I don't know, you know, call Paul McCartney and ask him to give you a guitar lesson. What's the automatic thought going to be? Well, he would never do that. Of course, that's the automatic thought. But have you tried it? See, you don't know, do you? And there's so many instances, and we hear this all the time, of people doing things that we would automatically assume that wouldn't work, and then people actually try it, and it did work. Well, see, our automatic thoughts are like that, and they can depress you, they can make you anxious, these thoughts. And I just want to give you three kind of quick categories here: yourself, other people, and kind of broadly, the world around you, kind of how it works. Okay. Another way to look at this, which some people speak of, you hear a lot of times, is kind of a cousin of this, is when people have confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we have a belief about something, then something happens, and we turn that belief into proof that we're right. See, I told you so. See, I tell you that. I mean, all bosses are like that. Of course, he said no. And it's our belief is not true, but something that will happen, and then we'll use that to confirm our beliefs. I I don't do this anymore. It just got too frustrating, depressing. But one of the things I used to do, when putting on my psychologist's mind, is I would take, and I won't name the networks, but take two networks, one of them right leaning, one of them left leaning, and put them up on the screen at the same time, talking about the same issue in the news that day. And each side would take the same issue and use it as proof that the other side was bad. Just confirmation bias. And our belief systems will drive these automatic thoughts. And I'm not really, you know, isn't even my field to talk about that stuff, but it is my field to talk about how the mind works. So I want to get out of that into where it affects you. And that's in those three areas of life: the clinical area, the relational area, and the performance area. So, how much of what you are feeling clinically, whether anxiety or stress or depression, low mood, is coming from thoughts that are just automatically flying around in your head and they're generating those moods? Or how much struggle in a relationship are coming from assumptions that you have of, well, that person's just unreasonable. You just can't talk to them. Or they're just like this, or they're just like that. and then seeing things and interpreting them in terms of that belief system. And it keeps us from being close. They're going to reject me. They think I'm stupid. They think this, they think that. And a lot of insecure attachment can be kind of fueled and driven by this stuff as well. When spouses won't talk to each other because they assume the other spouse is, well, they're not going to listen or this or the other. Or even finding a spouse, if you're single, the assumptions, I hear this all the time. Well, men are only interested in blah, 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 and women are only interested in blah, blah, blah. And then people stay passive and it affects their behavior and they don't step out there and meet people. And on and on and on. And then about dreams and goals. Well, they'll never hire me because I don't have the experience in A, B, or C. Or they'll never think, that I'm good enough for this position because A, B, or C. Or that will never work because, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we know, and the research has proven over and over and over again. Those are not thoughts. Those are automatic thoughts. It's like a sprinkler system that goes off. Nobody's watering the grass. It just goes off on a timer. Don't live your life with automatic thoughts. Take control of those thoughts. And that's a big thing that the cognitive people tell people to do. And let me give you a little trick here. What they do is they'll tell you, just start to monitor them. And when you have a thought about doing something or connecting with somebody or relating to somebody or accomplishing something, just listen to what you're automatically thinking about your assumptions about what's going to happen or your assumptions about yourself, and literally go on a path of writing those down. And once you write them down, then you're going to be seeing some patterns, or you're going to be seeing that you have certain beliefs and certain biases about certain situations or yourself or your abilities or this, that, and the other. And those are limiting. They're so limiting. They are so limiting. Plus, they're so destructive and not true. Validate stuff with reality. Don't let it stop you in your head. So then you observe those and you log them, you write them down, then you learn some stuff about how you think about yourself. And once you learn that, then you can go thinking. Newsflash, you can change your mind. I think I changed my mind. I changed my mind about that. What does that mean? I thought differently. One of my favorite verses, 1 Corinthians 13, Paul uses the phrase, when I was a child, I ... but when I became a man, I ... See, we think differently. That is a normal cognitive process that people go through. When you were a child, you used to think that the boogeyman lived under your bed or in the closet or in the dark. And then we grow up and find out, no, I think the boogeyman lives inside of me is where I am the boogeyman. Help me with me. Well, that's a big growth step when we do that. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about today. Just listen to your automatic thoughts. New vistas will open up to you. What if you didn't see your spouse as critical or grumpy, but if you saw them as maybe wounded or hurt? And then you started to hear some of that other stuff as a cry for help from a place of woundedness. That would change your behavior, wouldn't it? I mean, basically, that's what we do when we work with addicts. You don't see them as bad people. You see them as people that are caught up in something. One of my favorite verses, Galatians 6, is when you see a brother or sister who is caught up in something bad. Caught up, the Greek word there is actually means like a fish net. A fish gets caught in a net, they can't get out. Well, people get caught in addictions and other things, and they're powerless. That's why the first step of AA, what does it say? The 12 steps, we learned that we were powerless. Well, what if you saw somebody as unable to do any differently? Then our role became to help rescue them. Why? To avoid responsibility? No, they're still responsible. See, that's the worst thing about being an addict. You're powerless, and then you're also responsible for the damages that you're causing. Anybody need a savior? Yeah, well, that's a good point, right? When we get to the bottom and we get to the end of ourselves, then you change those beliefs about I'm unhelpable, I'm bad. You change those automatic thoughts to I'm in trouble, I'm powerless, I need help, and there is someone who can help me. His name is Jesus. See, that's a different belief. That's changing your mind. And then when you do that, you act differently every time you have a problem. You don't feel bad, you feel hungry. Or when somebody else has a problem, we don't feel judgmental, we feel helpful if they will allow us. Automatic thoughts will change your life if you get in touch with them and change them to intentional thoughts. And I'll close with one little story that makes me smile about Olivia, my oldest daughter. Um, Olivia was probably in about the fourth grade at the time, something like that, third or fourth grade. And she had a teacher that was pretty strict. Every morning, that teacher she was pretty tough. I mean, she might have been overly tough, but I thought it was pretty cool because she, you know, really had high standards of performance, and all the kids were a little bit anxious. And sometimes Olivia had something coming the next day, she would start to get anxious about it, and then she couldn't go to sleep. So one night, I hear her calling down the hall, "Daddy!" I went in there. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I can't, I can't sleep. I can't go to sleep. What am I going to do? What should I think about?" She said this phrase, "What should I think about?" I loved it. It just made me smile. "What should I think about?" I said, "Okay, Olivia, here's what we should do. Do you know how to count sheep?" And she goes, "No, how do you count sheep?" I said, "Well, in your head, lie there. I want you to picture a fence and picture sheep jumping over the fence. And every time they jump over the fence, then count them and just keep counting them. Don't ever stop. Just keep counting them. And in the morning, I'll ask you what you got to, but don't stop. Keep counting them." She goes, "Okay." So I'll go back to my study or wherever. About 5 minutes later, "Daddy!" And I go back in there. I said, "What's wrong?" She goes, My sheep keep crashing into the fence." I go, "Olivia, make them jump over the fence." She goes, "I can't. They keep crashing into the fence." I go, "Olivia, make them jump over the fence in your head." She goes, "I can't. They're crashing." I go, "Olivia, they're your sheep. They're not my sheep." You can learn to get the sheep to jump over the fence because it's in your head. And the lesson in that is it's not always easy with our automatic thoughts, but they are our sheep. So they are your thoughts. It's like a muscle. It's going to be hard in the beginning, but it'll get stronger.